Listen to me. Please listen. If you don't, if you won't, if you fail to understand, then the same incredible terror that's menacing me will strike at you!
They come from another world, spawned in the light years of space, unleashed to take over the bodies and souls of the people of our planet, bringing a new dimension and terror to the giant super scope screen.
It's whatever intelligence or instinct it is that can govern the forming of human flesh and blood out of thin air is fantastically powerful, beyond any comprehension.
A cursed, dreadful, malevolent thing was happening to those he loved.
This isn't just an ordinary body, is it?
I never saw one like it. It looks unused.
The sensational star discovery of The View from Pompey's Head. And now an undreamed of horror makes her life and love a vortex of fear.
Jack!
Miles, where do they come from?
I don't know.
Suddenly, while you're asleep, they'll absorb your minds, your memories.
I don't want any part of it.
You're forgetting something, Miles.
What's that?
You have no choice.
From city to city, an incredible hysterical panic spread.
Yeah, the one time Trump lost, he said it was rigged. The few weeks ago when
First,
Trump
there's
lost.
two Trumps.
Okay.
The one in the red tie is the real one. The one in the blue tie is not. The one you saw last night after the victory was the blue tie. Now, if you would punch up Dr. Carson, Ben Carson, when Trump called him a pedophile, and the next day he joined Trump. And the guy asked him, see, every now and then you slip and say so. He said, why'd you do that? He said, it's two Trumps. I was with the good one. You see it there? Just punch up. When somebody interviewed him, he said, there's two Donald Trumps. That's easy to pull up.
What was that yesterday? What was that? That was like a tale of two Trumps. That was like the worst of lies and the best of lies. It was like, I don't know, a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, a Tootsie, a Mrs. Doubtfire, a Victor Victoria. I mean, what was that?
Well, basically, Donald Trump is two people, Jekyll and Hyde.
Have you ever had that feeling when listening to Donald Trump speak that you're actually listening to two different Donalds?
You said there was two. Are there two Donald Trumps?
There are. Yeah. Well, which one is running for president? Which one?
Who have you seen? Tell us who you have seen.
Well, I have seen a man who's actually willing to sit down and engage in deep, serious conversations about the problems that affect our country.
So he said he has pathological disease. Now, if you're pathological, there's no cure for that, folks. Okay? There's no cure for that. But if you're a child molester, there's no cure. They can't stop you.
There are two different Donald Trumps. There's the one you see on the stage, and there's the one who's very cerebral, sits there and considers things very carefully. You can have a very good conversation with him. And that's the Donald Trump that you're going to start seeing more and more of right now.
I think there are two Donald Trumps. This
guy now gets the updated version every now and then because they need to bring him out for a presidential tour. And that presidential tour is just like the presidential clone tour. I'm not sure about Obama. Obama may not be a clone, but clearly if you look at what's going on in his cranium, and he's got those canals of Mars on his head, and you just look like, what's going on with this guy's brain? I'm not sure Obama is a clone. I think he might have gotten out of the clone deal. But Clinton and Bush and Carter, all of whom are still alive, my sense is that they've all been replaced. And they bring them out specifically because they need them. They need their participation in things. They need to run them for charities and fronts like the Red Cross, because we've seen in the past that both the Bushes and Bill Clinton have been very much involved in Red Cross relief efforts. You didn't see that with Houston, by the way. You did not see those three guys in connection with the Red Cross in Houston. You didn't see it in Florida, and you did not see it in Puerto Rico. And the reason for that is because they have outlived their usefulness with that organization. These people are smart most of the time. I mean, it's kind of like with Saul Alinsky. And one of the things that Alinsky talks about in Rules for Radicals is you need to know when to drop an action. You need to know when to stop it. You need to know when to cut it off. You need to know when the energy is drained out of it. Alinsky was brilliant. He was a brilliant guy. So if you look at the participation of the two Bushes and Bill Clinton as it relates to the Red Cross, the energy's gone. So they pulled them out of their Red Cross efforts. As far as I know, I didn't really see them. I didn't see a whole lot of that. And I looked pretty assiduously at these things. I didn't see them involved in Houston, Florida, or Puerto Rico. So going back to George Herbert Walker Bush, and I talked about this on the show the other night with Jerry and Nish, is that if you really watched him, during the run-up of the election, and watch this expansive figure sort of take control and live out his predestined place amongst the global elites. There was a time when I saw him get off of a plane. It might have been in like Dubai or Bahrain or one of these places in the Middle East. And he walked off the plane like he was in a drug stupor. And it's like, who is this guy? I don't recognize this version of Bush. And at that time, my understanding of clones was limited to movies, really, and not necessarily knowing that this could actually really take place. Although I had heard some whispers about this, but it became much more evident to me a few months later when George Green came to town in Olympia, and I'll tell you that story. So I'm watching this Bush character, and he starts off at the top of the plane, and it's not like he's walking down the gangplank of the plane like any normal person. And just your arms by your side, striding, get down to the bottom of the gangplank, and then there are people there waiting for you. You stick out your hand and you shake their hand. This is not what he did. He got at the top of the gangplank and he stuck out his hand right at the top and walked down the gangplank with his hand outstretched. I'm like, that's really weird. Like, who does that? So he got to the bottom, did the handshake, and I'm watching him, after this event. I'm like, there's something off with Bush. This is not the same guy. This is not the same guy I've been seeing. So fast forward, this is about 7 months later, George Green comes to town. And I didn't know who George Green was, but I saw the flyer, and it was like checking all those boxes. Like the things he was going to talk about were checking all those boxes. And I'm like, I got to go see this guy. So I paid my, $20 or whatever it was, $15, $20. And there might have been probably about 75 or 80 of us in this room, and George and his wife were there. And I was hanging out with this guy who was, this guy was like the Mel Gibson character from Conspiracy Theory on steroids. And he told me he was Special Forces. This is all within the span of about an hour and a half or 2 hours, right? He told me he'd been Special Forces, that he was on one of those TV shows when he was a kid back in the 50s. He was a kid genius. He'd been drafted by Delta Force. He'd actually time traveled, got into the future, and he basically said, it's okay, we win. And he was sharing all this stuff with me in the span of about, like I said, about 85, 90 minutes, and sporadically, because we're listening to George talk. And then he walked around, then he got up, he said, you see that guy, you see that guy, you see that guy? They were all CIA. Those guys are all CIA. And I say, right now what they're doing is they're looking at everybody in this room. and they're clocking everyone in this room, and they have photographic memories, and so they're going to be drawing dossiers about everybody that they've seen. I was like, well, this is pretty far out stuff. I'm kind of digging it though, because it's right up my alley. Okay, man, I'll buy into that. I get it. I get it. So this is when George Green tells us that Bush had been replaced. And he says all the presidents have been, recent presidents have been cloned and replaced, including Bill Clinton. I'm like, wow, this is matching up with my insight as to what's going on with Bush, because it did not seem like the same person. And then later on, of course, I told the story when he went to Japan, and when he was having dinner with the Japanese, he just face planted right into his food. Now, if you've read Kathy O'Brien's book, Transformation of America, one of the things that she says is that G.H.W. Bush and Dick Cheney are heroin users, and they will combine heroin and cocaine and have what's called a speedball. So, maybe perhaps he did a heroin knot-off in Japan. Perhaps really that might have been what happened. But what I think happened is you saw the clone expire. Like, that was it. The clone hit its expiration date, and he face planted, and they wheeled him right out of there. So that was my first introduction to this whole idea of cloning. And Donald Trump is the perfect candidate from an astrological perspective because he's a Gemini. And when we get into Gemini, we get into this whole idea and notion of doubles and twins and clones. Go back to the movie The Boys from Brazil, and there's that one town in Brazil where they have this massive amount of twins. And basically, that was kind of the offshoot of an experiment by the Nazis in South America, that they were experimenting not with cloning, but they were experimenting with being able to create basically twins on demand. And we know that with fertility drugs, which is probably an offshoot of what happened in Brazil, although you can't make a factual claim, but it feels right? We have these fertility drugs now that they maximize the potential for having twins and triplets. Look at Kate Nate or whatever her name. She was taking fertility drugs so she could have a kid. Boy, did she get a lot of kids. I mean, multiplied the potential of kids. It's pretty basic, right? Oh, here's a fertility drug. Okay, it's not just having a kid, but you get, how about more than one kid? More than two kids, and there'll be facsimiles. Perhaps the fertility drugs were an outgrowth of the experiments in Brazil. I'm just throwing that out there. So we know that at the very least, eugenically, this idea of twins has been part of a scientific evolution. And to some extent, we can see this in the manifestation of fertility drugs. And it's not always going to work that way, but the instances of having twins are far greater with them. Okay, we've established that. That's a baseline kind of representation of this. Now, Trump, the Gemini, is a perfect candidate for this whole idea of cloning. And, you heard, again, in the introduction, that there were two, okay? There were more than one Hillary Clinton, obviously, during the run-up of the election. And we actually saw one of her versions expire, just like the George Bush version expire. And, do you remember that guy that used to follow her around? You remember that guy? What happened to him? What's his new assignment? Anyway, he grabs her, and then into the car she goes. And then the next time you see her, she pops out of Chelsea's apartment, and it doesn't even look like her. This person doesn't even look like her. I mean, she's shorter, the hair, everything's wrong. Everything's off about the whole thing, I wonder who's on the Hillary book tour. Who's doing the book signing? By the way, look up the local Costco in your area. There's a good chance that Hillary Clinton will be showing up there, signing copies of her new book, What Really Happened. If you want to be a bit subversive, you can show up and you can ask her interesting questions. Of course, she'll laugh and she'll have some flip response. Her replacement actually has a pretty good sense of humor. So here we have Gemini Trump. Now, yes, there is the possibility that there was more than one Trump. We saw him on the debates. We saw him on the Tory. I don't have a problem with that at all. But what's happened recently is that whoever is occupying the White House now, maybe he's able to fire off these tweets that are incendiary towards the NFL and players in the NFL, whatever. But it doesn't seem like he's the same person. He looks different. The hairline is different. The complexion is different. I don't know about the height. The height may not be the same. Trump is about 6'3". He's a pretty tall guy. So the height would be an interesting component to look at. But the voice is decidedly different. This is not the same sort of voice we've heard from Trump. And it's fascinating. I'm just thinking about this whole piece with Gemini, and it goes back to Paul McCartney, also a Gemini, and the Paul is dead, and the various Pauls that have shown up. This is the Gemini effect. Cloning is definitely the Gemini effect. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to play you a piece of audio. This is from the Today Show in England, and this will give you a contemporary scientific baseline matrix version of cloning. This is what they're actually kind of bringing out as the state of cloning in science on Earth. Here we go.
Story has taken us from South Korea to Scotland, from a tiny dog to one of the planet's largest creatures. We travelled thousands of miles around the world to investigate the world of cloning.
Look at her. Meet Millie, officially the world's smallest dog. Her folks from Puerto Rico can't live without her. Now they hope they won't have to.
You love her?
So much. Yes. She's a really, really special girl.
So special, they are paying $100,000 to clone her. We've flown to South Korea, where NBC News has been granted exclusive access to what amounts to a cloning factory. The doctor behind the operation rarely gives interviews, but he's cloned nearly 1,000 dogs.
884.
Wow. And today, Dr. Woo Sak-wan is implanting a Labrador with embryos from Millie.
That's the moment.
That's right.
In 2005, Dr. Wan was at the centre of a scandal for falsifying human stem cell research.
There's eye cream here.
Since then, he has rebuilt his business, even expanding into cosmetics.
Do you think people deserve a second chance?
Hopefully.
He's begun cloning cows to produce high-quality steaks at a lower cost.
Okay. Simple as that?
Yeah.
This is to get better steaks?
Yes.
All of these?
Yeah.
Are all cloned?
Yeah.
And from these mammals to an even larger extinct one. In this lab, Dr. Wan's team is trying to extract DNA from the remains of a prehistoric mammoth. Whether successfully, they wouldn't tell us. But around the world, in Russia, I meet scientist Alexei Tikhonov.
It's all mammoth bones here.
All mammoths. He searches for mammoths frozen in ice and time. Professor Tikhonov is collaborating with the Koreans, trying to bring the long-extinct species back to life. Mammoths lived during the last ice age, only existing today in movies.
A whole baby mammoth. You could clone from an animal like this.
If you have such preservation, real hair, and hair, by the way, is one of the best sources of DNA.
The plan is to use Asian elephants as surrogate mothers. It wouldn't be easy and may never happen. But
you'd like to see thousands of these roaming Russia again?
Yes, of course.
You must be mad.
No.
So, could cloning one day be applied to humans? We travel to Scotland, the birthplace of cloning.
It was here, near Edinburgh, 20 years ago, that scientists first cloned a mammal. Her name was Dolly the sheep.
Dolly's creator says since then, human cell cloning has helped the study of diseases like Parkinson's, but cloning humans would simply be unfair.
Clone of a major baseball player, you'd expect that child to be a baseball player. He might not want. He might want to play soccer.
And the scientist who's made cloning his business?
Do you hope one day to be able to do this kind of work with human genetics?
Absolutely not.
You don't?
Human cloning, scientists say, would be extremely difficult. It is also illegal in many countries. But as for man's best friend, the technology devoted to reuniting pedos with a beloved companion is changing their world right now.
How are you, everybody?
And some things you need to know, they say they have a 40% success rate at cloning those puppies. So even if you do get your pet cloned, it may not be successful, and the dog that you get may not be exactly the same as your original pet. It may have different colours on its fur, all kinds of things.
Can we go back to the woolly mammoths for a second? What are the potential consequences of something like that?
It's really difficult to do, and you know, even if they manage to do it, how many of those can you clone, and what effect would it have on the planet? I mean, there's so many questions raised by this.
Yeah. Why?
Right. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
I guess for some people, it's a question of just being able to do it. Or what kinds of things can they discover as a result of that? But many people are opposed to it.
As Brian Gumble would say.
Why?
Why? Thank you very much.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that.
Okay, so that was the Today Show. That was the Today Show. Hello? Yeah, that was the Today Show. And that was part of what they call the revelation of the method. They show you a little bit of something, and they give you a little bit of a taste, and they say, here you go. We have cloning. We're cloning pets. We're cloning sheep. We're cloning meat. Cloned meat is going to be the next big deal. And guess what? Just like how they don't allow the labeling for genetically modified foods, because if you saw what was in a genetically modified food, would you pick it up and eat it? Would you buy it? I wouldn't buy it. I mean, if you saw that there was a frog gene inside of your avocado, would you buy that avocado? Absolutely not. Which is why Monsanto and ConAgra and all the big agri companies have seriously fought any kind of labeling for genetically modified foods. They'll throw as much money at that as possible in order to forestall that revelation, because it would absolutely and utterly crush their marketplace. Well, the same thing will probably happen with meat. You won't know if your meat comes from a cow that was born and raised in a pasture, ate lots of nice green grass, and then was lovingly slaughtered. No. Or inhumanely slaughtered and fed a high fructose cornmeal diet. No, that probably wouldn't know that. It would just be meat. Again, because if there's cloned meat, they say, oh yeah, there's a little C on it for clone. Are you going to buy the meat? I mean, some people will do anything. You know, last night I was at a bar getting a drink. And I've never been to this bar before. And I walk in and they ask for my ID. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah. All right. I guess I'll show you my ID. I don't look anything like I'm under 21, but, you know, I'll play the game, whatever. The bartender takes my ID and puts it in a scanner, like one of the tricorders on Star Trek, and scans my ID. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? Well, we have to do this because We have a lot of people here who are really crazy, and we have to keep track of them. We have to make sure that we're not letting in somebody who we've 86'd before. And, we keep information on them, like, can you leave your knife outside? I'm like, are you kidding me? Where does this information go? Is it just like your own little stash of information? Is this your little brother computing system? Now, I know probably why they're doing this, because this is a place where they have had problems with people. And in order to get insurance and get a liquor license, the owner, I'm assuming this is what happened, that the owner of the bar had to agree to this kind of digital vetting for anybody who shows up there. It's kind of like after you've been pulled over for the third time and you've been drinking, and you get that, I think it's even after the second time, you get a DUI, you've got to get a breathalyzer. You've got to blow into something so your car will start. If you want to drive, you have to agree to it because of the liability. So this is probably like the ID version of the breathalyzer. I'm thinking that. I'm hoping that. Because if it's not, then it's just completely invasive. But people will go there because they want to drink and hang out at a shitty bar. I'll never go back. But people are willing to accept things because it's either easy or convenient, or they don't want to go through the hassle of taking that extra step and saying, no, I will not submit to this. I won't. Now, it would be different maybe if there were some perks involved. Like they take your ID and they have a club there, and after a certain amount of drinks, you get points and you get free drinks, and they know what kind of drink you like. Oh, hello. Hi. Oh, yes. I have a tequila on the rocks waiting for you just right now, because we know that that's what you like. But you think that that's what happens in a place like that? No, of course not. But people are willing to accept stuff. They're just willing to. People are, I think, unfortunately, and this is what we have to fight against. It's the tide of inertia and entropy, and people are basically lazy for the most part. And I'll raise my hand. I could be way more productive than I am. I could work 15 hours a day. That's the Virgo in me. Anyway, so when they show us this piece on cloning, they're participating in the revelation of the method. Oh yeah, isn't that nice? Oh, we might have pets cloned. We certainly can clone a sheep. Oh wow, a woolly mammoth. Gee, isn't that just like Jurassic Park? Wow, look how far science is coming. That's the Reader's Digest version. They give you a little bit. They give you a little taste. And remember, the military-industrial complex, black ops, dark science, they are always about 50 years ahead of what we're seeing. Think about that. 50 years ahead. We live in a pretty technological world. There's a lot going on at kind of a user interface, consumer surface, science, medicine. If you really drill down, you get into things like deep learning, AI, Google. I mean, we can see that stuff is available for us to look at. Quantum computing, CRISPR, gene splicing, all these things, they're out there. And it's the trickle down of technology. It's beginning to become accessible to larger and larger groups of people at a more quote unquote user friendly level. So if that's the case, and these are some pretty sophisticated and advanced technologies like deep learning that we're seeing, then what is going on behind the scenes? What is happening in the military-industrial complex with the black ops and and this is why all the whistleblowers come into play, and this is why people love the super soldiers, and because they actually have had some kind of theoretical connection to these technologies, and it legitimizes them in some ways. But I think we have to, at the very least, make a leap and an assumption that the technology that we don't see is far more advanced than the technology that we do see. Let's just put that out there. And if that's the case, then being able to clone a dog or being able to clone a sheep, or even in the Jurassic Park fantasy, being able to clone a person is not only quite possible, but in my estimation, very probable. All right, let's go back in time and let's bring up this piece of audio. The audio I'm about to play you is from Dr. Peter Better, and Peter Better was a very interesting character. He was one of the early kind of conspiracy theorists. Perhaps Mel Gibson's character in Conspiracy Theory was based upon him, and a number of other kind of people create kind of a composite character. Peter Better used to put out these cassettes, and he used to send them out. They were like audio newsletters. This guy was ahead of his time in terms of content. He was also ahead of his time in terms of how to distribute the content. If he had been around during the time of the internet, this guy would be an internet rock star. But he's not, and his delivery is kind of awkward and slightly dramatic. So it's interesting listening, but get beneath his delivery and listen to what he's saying, because he's one of the first people that broached this idea and subject of presidents and clones. Here's Dr. Peter David Better.
I am revealing primarily for history. I know, even before I reveal it, that some of my listeners will desert me after they hear it, saying, it just cannot be. But, my friends, I also know that the events in the days ahead will be impossible to understand without knowing this secret. So I do not ask that you believe it simply because I say it. What I do ask, and I ask it for your own good, is that you keep an open mind. Listen and hear what I must now reveal. Then watch events themselves. My friends, since World War II and before, scientists the world over have been probing for the basic secrets of life itself. It has now been over a quarter century since the crucial discovery of the DNA double helix. Test tube babies are now a reality, and that began not long ago in England, where the mystery of DNA was first unraveled. Then, of course, there are clones. That is, creatures which are reproduced by artificial means and which are exact duplicates of an original. Clones of all kinds of animals have been produced successfully in the laboratory, but that is not what bothers people. In the recent past, it has been claimed that human clones are also possible, and that some may already be in existence. These last claims about human clones have been ridiculed, denied, and suppressed by all kinds of officials. The reason is that the idea of duplicate human beings impinges upon a super-secret realm of intelligence activities by both Russia and the United States. True clones are not involved, but something that bears a superficial resemblance to cloning is going on. And the last thing the powers that be want is for you and the public to have any hint about what is afoot. In Russia as well as in the West, research has been underway for many years in biological synthesis, that is, artificial life forms. And according to high intelligence, a stunning breakthrough took place in Russia some years ago. The Russians refer to this breakthrough as a providential discovery, something they learned almost by accident. They discovered the key to creating what are known as organic robotoids. An organic robotoid is an artificial robot-like creature. It looks and acts exactly like a human being, and yet it is not human. A robotoid is alive in a biological sense, but it is an artificial life form. Robotoids respond to conventional routine medical tests in the same way as humans do. They eat, they drink, they breathe, they bleed if cut, and they can be killed. Robotoids can also think, but they think only in the sense that a computer thinks. Like any other computer, the brain of a robotoid has to be programmed for each assignment it is given. But unlike many electronic computers, the biological computer brain of a robotoid possesses an enormous memory. As a result, robotoids can be programmed to communicate and think in such complex patterns that they act human. Organic robotoids are remarkable creatures, but they have many drawbacks. They don't grow or reproduce, but must be manufactured one by one in the desired form. They also have a very limited lifespan, measured in months or even weeks, depending upon how they are utilized. This is due to the fact that their metabolism, while it resembles that of humans, is very inefficient. A robotoid can be manufactured on very short notice, a matter of hours. But after a few weeks or months, it suddenly begins to degenerate physically and mentally. When that takes place, the robotoid has to be removed from service and disposed of. To extend its useful life as much as possible, a robotoid is customarily cooled down to slow its metabolism between assignments. Organic robotoids are extremely expensive, troublesome creatures to produce and utilize. And robotoid capabilities do not exceed those of human beings. All they can really do is simulate human beings. But, my friends, for intelligence purposes, that's all they have to do. To produce an organic robotoid, it is necessary to have a pattern to go by. The pattern required is that of genetic coding, taken from a few cells from the body of a human being. In this respect, the Russian technique sounds like cloning, but the technique itself is totally unrelated to genuine cloning. A robotoid is produced within a matter of hours, and it simulates the human donor at his current age. Like any man-made copy of anything, a robotoid is never a perfect copy of the human that is to be simulated. There's always small discrepancies in appearance and behavior, but these are seldom great enough to arouse any suspicion. Last month, I revealed that the Russians can manufacture organic robotoids, which are almost exact carbon copies of real human beings. This is done by a process that simulates the genetic coding of the person to be copied. It sounds a little like cloning, but it's not. A clone of a human would itself be a human, but an organic robotoid is not human. It's an artificial life form, like an animal in some ways, but like a computerized machine in others. Every Russian robotoid has what is called a holographic brain. This brain duplicates essentially the entire memory of a person being copied. The key to doing this is a new technique called an ultrasonic cerebral hologram. Using high-frequency sound waves, which are inaudible, a complete three-dimensional picture is made of a person's brain. This is a painless, non-destructive process, and under the proper conditions, it can be done without the person even being aware of it. Last month, I revealed that the Russians are using Nelson Rockefeller's hit list to weed out Bolsheviks here in America, and for roughly 3 years they have been preparing for this day. They have been secretly making cerebral holograms of the people on the list at every opportunity. This has been done to every person on Rockefeller's list who has visited Russia or Eastern Europe in the past 3 years. When an organic robotoid is made to simulate, for example, our late President Jimmy Carter, 2 major factors are involved. One is the genetic coding required to simulate Carter's appearance, voice, fingerprints, and so on. The other is a holographic image of Carter's brain. This image is a complete record of the neuron patterns which existed in Carter's brain at the moment the hologram was made. Therefore, it contains all of the memory and knowledge Carter had up to that moment. When a Carter robotoid is made, the biological computer in its head is caused to form according to the holographic record of Carter's brain. However, certain portions of the robotoid computer are caused to deviate from the holographic record. The end result is a biological computer
which has to be programmed, but which contains essentially all of Carter's memory, involuntary mannerisms, and the like. As a result, a Carter robotoid will automatically do certain kinds of things without the need for specific programming. For example, a Carter robotoid will seem to recognize old friends. That's because the computer memory of the robotoid reproduces Carter's memory of that friend. The holographic process puts it there automatically without the Russian programmers even having to know it's there. Organic robotoids are such amazing creatures that they are still a subject of questioning and debate. This is true even among the Russian scientists who made them a reality. For example, robotoids seem to have no true instinct for self-preservation. In this regard, they act like machines, simply doing as they are told to do. By contrast, both humans and animals generally have the instinct for self-preservation. Robotoids can be programmed for self-preservation, but they are equally willing, if willing is the word, to perform suicide missions. Exploratory one-way trips into space are only one example of this. If a space mission looks too dangerous to risk the life of an experienced cosmonaut, a robotoid can now be used. The robotoid copy of the cosmonaut is already trained the moment it's made, thanks to its holographic memory. Organic robotoids look and act so much like human beings that it's hard for us to get used to the idea that they are not human. But the Russians decided several months ago that the stakes are too high not to employ them. And so, the silent Russian invasion of America by robotoids is now well underway. As of now, the White House and Cabinet are under complete control by Russia. According to my latest intelligence report, only one member of the Carter cabinet is still alive. All the rest, including the ad hoc gang of 4, have been replaced by Russian robotoids. Likewise, the United States now has a Supreme Court made up of 9 Russian robotoids.
That was Dr. Peter Bader. Here we go, Dr. Peter Bader. I got a text message from James over on Facebook, and he said, "This guy in the Farcast is blowing my mind." Just for those of you who don't know who Peter Bader was, let me give you just the Wikipedia notes on Peter Bader. So there's Peter David Bader was born June 21st, 1921. Guess what? He's a Gemini, 29 degrees. Was an American attorney and financier. He ran for the governor of West Virginia in 1968 in the Republican Party primary, although he was formerly a Democrat, but lost. Politically, he was a staunch defender of ex-Alabama Governor George Wallace. Bader also drafted Wallace as the American Party candidate in 1973, but numerous Republicans opposed such efforts. Nonetheless, he later became a member of the Draft Wallace Committee. He was born in Huntington, Virginia, son of Lebanese immigrants who became grocers after coming to the United States in 1899. He graduated from West Virginia University and later got his Doctor of Juris degree in law from the law school at George Washington University. Remember, that's where Carol Quigley taught. Let's see, what else do we have here? I think Quigley taught at American University. I have to double check that. Little voice in my head. We'll look at that before the show's over. Bader practiced law in Washington, D.C. from 1951 to 1961. He was the general counsel for the American Gold Association, now called the Gold Prospectors Association of America, from 1958 to 1961. In 1961, he was appointed by President John F. Kennedy as general counsel for for the Export-Import Bank of the United States, in which he served until 1967. So Peter Better was not some kind of lunatic fringe character. I mean, this was a guy who had and held a position in the United States government under John F. Kennedy and even beyond Kennedy. Better also co-founded a mining exploration company in Zaire and represented international financial interests in Europe, South America, and the Middle East. In 1973, he published a book, Conspiracy Against the Dollar, The Spirit of the New Imperialism, which alleged that world events were controlled by three secret factions: the Rockefeller family, the Bolshevik Zionist Axis, and the Kremlin. His intent was to warn everyone against the plans of the Rockefeller cartel, which he thought risked having the United States meet the same fate as France in World War II. In 1974, Better publicly stated that most of the gold in Fort Knox had been sold to European interests at prices vastly below market rates. According to him, international speculators had dishonestly obtained the gold. This is a popular thought, that what exists in Fort Knox is merely just bricks of lead that are plated gold. Better released a series of 80 audio newsletter tapes between 1975 and 1982. Better was known for his claims without evidence against political leaders, some of which included allegations of conspiracy in the highest political positions. Better claimed that Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson was involved in the Kennedy assassination. Does anybody think that that's too far afield? I don't think so. In fact, I think he was a key player in it. Several important public figures, such as David Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger, and Jimmy Carter, are actually dead and are being impersonated by organic robotoids. How else could Henry Kissinger live for such a long time? Patty Hearst was kidnapped by the CIA after the Hearst newspaper published secret congressional testimony. The testimony was revealed that America's atomic secrets were handed over to the Soviet Union, not stolen by Soviet spies, before America's first atomic bomb was finished, and that the Rockefellers were directly involved in this plot. The CIA was responsible for the secret death of General George Scratchley Brown because he simply knew too much. The Jonestown Massacre was staged to camouflage a joint U.S.-Israeli military operation to destroy a Soviet missile base in Guyana. The Jonestown incident explained the movement of U.S. military personnel into Guyana and concealed the real casualties from the attack on the Soviet base. Particle beam weapons and other advanced aerial weapons under secret development had the power to change the weather. Both the U.S. and the Soviet Union had developed such weapons. So Peter Better was way ahead of his time. Way ahead of his time. And some of the terms that he's using around the robotoids in terms of the holographic computer model. And now remember, this is around 1979, 1980. And he dies in 1984, by the way. He was around 60 years old. So what happens, well, what was going on at that time? I think of where computing was. It was all punch cards. It was all big spools of electromagnetic tape. I mean, that's where computing, it was big, bulky. You know, you had the Sperry Rand UNIVAC computers, but these were beasts, these computers. And computing power is nothing like it was today, and yet he's talking about very sophisticated types of computing power. And that actually fits the 50 years ahead model in terms of technology. Now, he's talking about the robotoids, organic robotoids. Later on, Better and some of the other people that were exploring this also began to broach the possibility of clones and how the United States was working on the clone model while the Russians or / the Soviets were advancing the robotoid and the synthetic human model. So what I want to do now is I want to play a clip by George Green. And George actually talks about the cloning of presidents. And this sort of dovetails with Better's material, but it's a little bit different. It's about 6 minutes, and it's kind of an offshoot of what George was talking about when I first saw him in Olympia, Washington in 1990. Okay,
Right.
so here we go. Here's George
Absolutely.
Green.
You know, if you go to Disney World, for instance, down there in the Haunted Mansion, you see the hologram, right? Oh, you know how to make a hologram. Well, our scientists have learned how to make people. They call them synthetics. Are you familiar with those?
Well, actually, we just interviewed John Lear, and he was talking about being in an audience in which they were given a lecture by a guy that they thought was real and found out later he was a hologram.
Well, it's a synthetic. A synthetics, when you touch their skin, it feels like plastic almost. That's the latest technique. The old techniques, if you guys can rent a video, the boys from Brazil, rent it, because in it, it gives you the exact way how our government's been making people.
Really?
Yeah,
Well,
and the
on.
Soviets have a different method called...
I mean, making people meaning temporary people?
No, walking, talking ones.
Meaning through genetics? You're not talking about that?
Well, let me tell you. The movie shows it, but I'll share it with you right now.
All right.
All I need to do is take 2 cells off of your body, yours.
Uh-huh.
We give them a small electrical charge. I'm just they'll act like a fertilized egg. If I got a fertilized egg, all I need is a receiver in order to make it. So they were hypnotizing women, said they were being invaded by aliens. And the fetus starts growing, right? Needs food. Well, they can use cows and sheep, too. Again, a food source. That's all we need. After about 14 weeks, all of a sudden that fetus is gone. Because they've learned to take, that's when the fetus starts developing its own blood supply. Then they've used a pituitary hormone extract that they have, which accelerates the being that grows. And the original technology was given to our government by the Greys. Now, the reason was that our scientists were all excited because we could have spare parts. If you need a heart or a liver or anything, you won't have any rejection. It's your own DNA, right?
Okay, because theoretically, if we have overpopulation, we don't need more people, right?
But the so-called elite are selecting on who they want to have around anyway, so if we want to keep people going as long as we can. I talked to the doctor that was working on regeneration of Castro, for instance.
Right.
On the DNA sequencing. And they're just learning about this.
Well, my understanding is that a lot of presidents have already been replaced.
That's right.
Yeah,
I don't think...
They're walking around, they look old, but they basically, some of the people are just
I'll
second,
just give you
third
something
copies.
I'll give you something to ponder. Get some old videos of George Bush, when he first came into office. Look at the person and listen to him speak. Look at his actions and listen to everything that's there. Now, it's a lot easier to put somebody out in front to act as even Bush did. He had somebody else that was up there acting like he is and look like it. Even Hitler had he had his stand. In fact, his stand-in was the one that they found in the ground over in Germany. I mean, Hitler and Eva and the dog and 14 other people got aboard a plane and flew down to Barcelona, Spain. You were aware of that. And then ended up in Antarctica or in Swabenland and then died a few years ago in Brazil.
That's what we heard.
I have all the documents from our own government.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a contact, one of our
Stalin
contacts.
Stalin asked for they tried to burn the body, and he got the body back, and he said, we had different ears, and the testicles were different and everything else, so they knew it wasn't Hitler.
But is it a clone or not?
Oh, now going about cloning. Cloning techniques, since 1938, they've been making clone people. There's 8 countries making clones. I have a doctor friend that all it does is treat the clones.
Where do you get your information?
I get it from some of the people that are willing to come forth, and they talk to me because they hope I'll put the information out because they always got 2 people following them, and they may be killed. If I start talking about cloning too much, the people that get involved into that disappear on it. So I don't go into too many more details, but there is information that's available. And more and more of that's coming on the line. I just told you, go rent the movie.
Okay, Boys from Brazil.
Yeah, and you'll see the whole technique on what they show it to you in different places, so you can imagine what it's going on.
Okay, so...
Now let's go to the next step, because this is the most important part.
All right.
If your physical reality that you have, based on this physical life that you have, this dream, is made up of the experiences that is impregnated on your body and in your mind, consciously, right? Mm-hmm. Your soul memory is another thing. Mm-hmm. It goes back whatever time that you elected to be in this incarnation for whatever reason. Now let's show you the division on these things. Since the body's very physical, and we just got you making a physical being in a few months for spare parts, they said, now we've got the perfect deal. How can we have that work better? Well, if you go to the hospital today and get an encephalogram, what's that? That's the memory of your conscious mind. It's on the CD. Let's download it on this being. Now we got a walking, talking duplicate that has the total memory that you have, because we just took it off of your own mind.
Okay, it's like Blade Runner, the android.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. The only thing is that it's like this DVD recorder. Sometimes you have glitches in it, so you have to have them tuned up occasionally or redone. And so we take them to Camp David, or there's a wing at Bethesda Hospital to just tell you. If you go down there and check, you'll find the nurses, if they're willing to come forth, they'll tell you they work on those people, and they call them the others. I thought it was interesting. They're people. Remember, these people can think and act, but they don't have soul. That's also prophesized.
Right,
Soulless
that's
beings.
true. That's true.
Now we have another agenda that's going on, so you have to be careful of all this. There are many extraterrestrials that would like to be in on the game right now, so they can sometimes will come into these physical beings that we've made to manipulate them.
I see.
So now you have a combination effort that you have to look at, and discernment. You have to discern what the game is. Well, just figure that most of the leaders we have in the world have been bought and paid for or created to think a certain way. In the world. Mm-hmm.
That was George Green. That was George Green, and I believe that was Kerry Cassidy that he was talking with from Project Camelot. And basically he was laying out what I was sharing earlier on, that the advances of cloning came out of Mengele and the Nazis and the experiments in Brazil, which were clearly looking a lot like twins, but there was a lot more going on there. So if you want more background information and detail around this hidden in plain sight and the revelation of method, you can easily watch the movie The Boys from Brazil online. If you have any one of the movie services, you can probably find it rented for about $2.99. Now, at the end of that interview, what does George Green talk about? What does he mention? He mentions Camp David. And I've talked about Camp David before as being the cloning center. Donald Marshall, who apparently is a clone, I have not really spent a lot of time in Donald Marshall's world, although I've read some of his stuff on Facebook and some forums. He talks about Camp David and a few other places. He says Dulce is another area, center where they actually create the clones. So where was Trump in June? Right around June 16th or 17th, right around his birthday, where did he go? He went to Camp David. And what have we seen from Trump afterwards? Somebody who doesn't look or sound a whole lot like the guy that was running for president. And in fact, is it a coincidence that we have really the first false flag, the first big false flag on Trump's watch in Las Vegas after this Camp David moment in time with Trump? And now Trump is going to do everything that the neocons want him to do. He'll go to war with Iran. He'll go to war with North Korea. Anything that they want him to do, this version of Donald Trump will do it. He is now a mind-controlled slave. I hate to say it, but it's truth. John from San Antonio sent me an email yesterday, and he said that he'd watched Trump give a press conference / interview, and there was absolutely no mention of Las Vegas. There was no mourning. There was no sense of tragedy. There was no sense of feeling any kind of sadness or grief coming out of Trump. So what we're dealing with now is a human that is theoretically incapable of transmitting any kind of emotion. Think about it for a moment. So here we are, living in this very strange time, and living amongst not just a president, but more than likely governmental leaders who are more than just puppets. They're more than just puppets. They might just be absolutely mind-controlled robotoids or clones. I know it's crazy to think about. I know it's crazy to wrap your head around. But if you examine bits and pieces, shards of the evidence, Hillary Clinton, the exploration of the clone, George Bush, the exploration of the clone, Donald Trump, who doesn't look or sound anything like the guy that we saw in the run-up to the election, then that possibility, that fringe component becomes a lot more real. Well, what we like to do here on the show is we like to bring it back to center and give you something to think about, something to latch onto, something that's meaningful. You're not a clone, at least not yet. So if you're not a clone, then what are you? You're human. You're human. And each and every day, this day, Friday the 13th, the 710th, oops. Oh, hey. The 710th version, celebration, anniversary of when the Knights Templar got slaughtered on Friday the 13th, October, Friday the 13th. This is the day of the slaughter of the Knights Templar in southern France. I think it's the 710th anniversary of it. So on this day, the day in which Friday the 13th was coined and named after, one of the things that you can do is retain your humanity and nurture your divinity. Be in this world, but not of it. And you've got a very good chance around dealing with and navigating the times ahead. Just got an email from Patrick. He's been on the show before. Citizen Zen. You can check him out. Citizen Zen Health. He had a vision that the world's going to be split in two. This is where we're going. The world being torn asunder. I don't know if that's the case or not, but clearly on a political, emotional, psychological, and spiritual level, that split and that rift has already occurred. So, in the midst of all of this, use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible.